Bethesda calls the latest Starfield update small, but for some people this will be huge. It's available for PC players in beta from Steam, and the first item on this very short list is this: added support for AMD FidelityFX Super Resolution 3, FSR3. What is it? Well, there are a bunch of things that play together to make your visual experience from the game, and I will show you the actual effect this has on frame rate and visual quality in a few moments. In theory, we would all love to have graphics cards that can provide 4K resolution with very highly detailed graphics at hundreds of frames per second. Alas, not all of us can afford such graphics cards. FidelityFX Super Resolution is a way to give you more frames per second than what your game already renders. Say what? You heard right. Let's say your game manages to render 60 frames per second. With FSR3, you might get up to twice as many frames per second. First, a disclaimer. I am an Nvidia employee, so I will not mention Nvidia technologies and will not compare AMD and Nvidia in any way. Whatever I say is only about this technology and does not imply anything about other technologies. And no, I will not answer comments related to Nvidia. So how does it do this? Well, you need to understand there are two major parts to FSR3. One is called Super Resolution Upscaling. This one lets your game render lower resolution images and uses machine learning algorithms to scale them up without being pixelized. Machine learning is a part of what we call AI, but the learning part is already done ahead of time. So this lets your game render less than 4K for each frame and still get a 4K image that looks very close to what the game would have rendered. That means the game works less hard per frame, giving you more frames per second. The second part is called frame generation, which means adding new frames. The technology that enables this is called AMD Fluid Motion Frames. So let's break it down for a sec. The secret lies in the ability of graphics cards to efficiently encode video. The cardinal step in video encoding is called motion estimation, and it's the part where the algorithm needs to figure out what parts of the previous image have simply moved to another position in the new image. Graphics cards know how to do this very well, and by doing this with 2 frames, it can do a clever thing, like generating a frame that has these motion vectors in the same direction but doing only half of the distance. It's an oversimplification, but I believe it gets the idea across. So, let's see what this does. For starters, we are here at Aquila City, just about close to the entrance, and my game is set up to display 4K. Let's view the settings for a second. The window size is, and my graphics preset is low, but I'm going to set the upscaling to off. Now let me activate the performance overlay, and we can see that I'm not doing anything and I'm getting around 24 frames per second. My adapter is an RTX 3060, not much video RAM. You can see that the motion is very choppy, very unsmooth. And if you look at this area here, you can also see with low quality, there's a very distinct slight diagonal lines, which are a rendering effect or a rendering artifact. Can't really be helped. Panning is very annoying to the eyes, especially when I pan slowly. Okay, and you can see at the top right, the performance overlay keeps showing 23 frames per second. Remember we talked about upscaling. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to disable VSync just to see what that does. Okay, you can see now that it's generating 164 frames per second. With VSync, we're getting down to 60. So now let's enable upscaling and say that we are going to be using upscaling with FSR3. And here we have dynamic resolution. The dynamic resolution means that the game will allow itself to reduce the resolution it's actually rendering when it needs to render more heavily. Okay, currently it says that the render resolution scale is 100%. If I turn this off, that means it'll always try to render 100%. Let's go out and see what that does. Frame rate drops considerably, but this may be an artifact of my game. No, I think it's fixed itself, and we're back at around 22 or 23 frames per second. No dynamic resolution. Back to the settings, to the display, and we're going to set the resolution scale to around 75%. coming out. We're at a steady 24. Now it's getting around 30. So we're already seeing an uptick from 22, 23 to around 27, 28 frames per second. The motion is pretty choppy now because I've disabled VSync. Now disabling VSync on a monitor that generates only 60 frames per second, or can only hold 60 frames per second, is pretty useless. Let's enable VSync again. Let's see what that does. So right now we're only using FSR3 for generating 75% or upscaling from 75%, trying to get more frames per second, but that doesn't help us that much. Now, okay, VSync is on again. We're still seeing around 30. Motion is a little bit better. Okay, a little bit better, but that artifact is still there. Back to the settings. Now, let's try to get something much nicer going on. I'm going to go and say select high. With VSync on, one of the things that really hurts is motion blur. I'm going to reduce motion blur a little, just to get a little bit better, or maybe even off. Some people like motion blur, I don't. I will disable dynamic resolution, but the dynamic resolution scale, let's currently leave it at 75. And see, with most things on high here, how badly this works. Now, first of all, you can already see that the artifact is gone. But my frames per second are suffering. Okay, it's around 18 frames per second with this. That probably means that the game is rendering even less. Pretty jumpy. It's reaching about the same. If I wasn't using FSR3, I'd probably not be able to manage 24 frames per second with this quality. The highest available is probably going to be even worse, but let's see if I can get more than 23. And you'll be the judge, of whether the quality has suffered significantly. What we're going to do is we're going to reduce the resolution scale to 50. We're going to leave everything on high. But when the resolution scale is 50%, that means the game is rendering full HD, 1920 by 1080. Okay? That's all the game is rendering. Now that doesn't look like it's made a significant difference in the quality, right? The frames the quality looks about the same, but look, the motion is a little bit better. Yeah, what can we do to improve things here? Yeah, now we're hitting 30. Actually hitting 30 frames per second with most things set to be on high. Can we get any higher? This way I'm actually optimizing my experience to find out what works for me well and what doesn't. There are some things that hurt or cost a lot of performance. Shadows, volumetric effects and things like that. So let's reduce the volumetric lighting to low. And let's put the shadow quality at medium. Reflections cost a lot. So let's reduce reflection by a lot. And contact shadow to medium. Okay. Having done that, we're seeing 38. And you know, this is probably the capability, the top ability of my graphics card, especially when it's recording. Some of the performance is being used. You can see that the GPU utilization is steady at almost 100%, right? But now, where we previously had visual artifacts, rendering artifacts around this area, we have nothing. And we're still seeing 37 frames per second compared to the 23 or so that we had before, and that makes the game way better. Now, if I was willing to give up a little bit more, I could probably get even higher. Okay, if I just went not too high but to medium, and then disable motion blur, and go down with contact shadows, volumetric lighting, reflections, and shadow quality. And still, the dynamic resolution is 50%. But I'm still rendering 4K. Yeah, we get a little bit extra, so that's 42 frames per second. That makes things even slightly better. And at this level, we're still not seeing rendering artifacts here. But if you look at the fence here, there is some amount of glitching in the fence, even when I'm totally motionless. The rendering is not perfect, and it's hitting almost 40 frames per second. Well, for somebody with a graphics card like mine, 35 to 40 is definitely better than 24. I wish I could have more. I can tell you that when I disable the recording, I'm hitting a slightly higher, something like 45, sometimes close to 50 frames per second in this environment. That's it. If you want to see more explanation videos like this, let me know. Sure, ask questions in the comments. I'll try to explain as much as I can, and I hope to see you soon.